Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah wa alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Welcome guys. Today we are going to be reacting to this video. Okay, so this is a Christian trying to, you remember this attribute I told you, Aseity. I told you this attribute is essential to God. The attribute of what? Aseity, meaning God is uncaused, is independent of everyone for his own existence, meaning God is in and of himself. It doesn't depend on others for his own existence. And I showed you in my previous video that the Son and the Holy Spirit lack this attribute. They are dependent on the Father for their existence. Okay. Now, this guy is going to explain why this is not a valid objection. So let's just give it a look. Okay. So let's start.
His role in the one act. Question number 6. How can the three divine persons be distinct yet have the same essence? If all the persons share the same divine characteristics, then we will not be able to distinguish the persons of the Trinity. They will be confused. The response is that yes, all the persons are fully God. They all have the same divine characteristics. They all share the divine characteristics. However, we know of their distinction because first of all, there's a distinction between nature and person, nature and hypostasis, and that they have hypostatic properties that these persons in specific have that the other persons don't have. For example, the Son is begotten, whereas the Father is unbegotten, right? And the Holy Spirit is proceeded. So these are hypostatic properties that the persons uniquely have that allows us to distinguish them. In a way, this is not so different from human hypostatic properties. For example, one of my hypostatic properties, you will say, is I'm a Turkish citizen. Another is that I have a YouTube channel. Another hypostatic property I have is that I'm a Christian. You might find different people that, for example, they might be Christian, but they're not Turkish citizens, and they don't have a YouTube channel, right? So that's one of the things that, now, they won't define the kind of a person I am, but they will describe what kind of a person I am, and this will help you distinguish me from other people. So, if you apply this to the way it's applied to human beings, the logic still stands. And finally, the final question.
Okay, so you hear what it says, what you just said there. When you hear hypostatic property, it's just talking about your own personal property. Okay, so your personal property is what makes you who you are, you, individual, your identity, distinct from other people. Okay, in your own kind nature. For example, in humanity, I'm a particular human in the entirety of humanity. So this person has already chosen without even knowing. Since he's even talking about Gregory of Nyssa anyway, they have chosen the kind of universal approach to natures. Okay, so he believes there's this kind nature of humanity, and each one of us, we are an hypostasis in humanity. Okay, so he thinks this is the same thing with God. So you have the divine nature, and then each person of the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, they are hypostasis of that divine nature, meaning they are instantiating that particular nature. Okay, so that's what he believes. So let's just continue. Now, the problem is that, remember what he said in that first part. He was saying that, see, the Father has a particular hypostatic property and of being uncaused, being ase, while the Son and the Holy Spirit, they don't have it. Okay, it's not just to distinguish them, it's to show that the Father is uncaused and the sole cause of the Son and the Holy Spirit. That's what you should understand from there. It's not like, we just want to identify them and that's it. No. Now, there's a verse in the Bible where it says, my Father is greater than I. Okay, the church fathers said this and they're like, yeah, the Father is greater. Why? Because of origination. Even though they don't mean it in the greater, like it does matter. They think it doesn't matter, but we will show why it matters later. Okay, then they think it doesn't matter if the Father is greater than the Son, since and we'll further explain it since this guy is going to. I'll show you at the end. Okay, let's just continue.
Is how can God be caused? If the Father is uncaused, but the Son and the Spirit are caused, won't that imply different natures? Now, this is a philosophical argument I've seen commonly from Muslims, although you see this from non-Trinitarians as well. How can God have a cause? That's completely unacceptable. Well, this argument will stem from a presupposition, and this presupposition is that causation denotes nature, right? So it's a part of nature, but it doesn't. It explains the existence of something or how it comes to be. For example, the causation of a tree can be caused in different ways, right? This is how St. Gregory of Nyssa explains it. For example, you can either plant a tree and grow it that way, or a tree can just naturally grow. So these will be two different ways a tree can be caused, but that doesn't mean that there are different tree natures. And this can be applied for different things as well. For example, Adam. Adam is unbegotten. He's not begotten of a human being. He was directly created by God. We are, on the other hand, begotten. Now, look at the kind of illogicality of this. If causation denoted nature, then Adam will have a different nature than ours. But what is begotten is something else. Well, you can only begot something else that is consubstantial with you. You can't, as a human being, beget a chair. I mean, imagine your wife, imagine You have the fancy post marriage night with your wife, and your wife becomes pregnant, and the doctor checks her tummy and says, "Sir, we have a massive problem. Your wife is going to give birth to a television." That's not going to happen. Okay, or she's going to give birth to a river. That's not going to happen, right? You can't beget another nature. You have to beget something that's consubstantial to you. But that will be impossible, right? That will be absolutely impossible in the case of Adam. If that's the case, then essentially we have to basically say human beings cannot ever be created. So the point that I'm making here is that causation is something that is relational. It is not something that denotes nature. Right? So Gregory of Nyssa says, if one were to ask a husbandman about a tree, whether it were planted or had grown of itself, and he were to answer either that the tree had not been planted or that it was the result of planting, will he by that answer declare the nature of the tree? Surely not. You can think of another analogy of an eternal uncaused torch, right, that is burning. Imagine that torch, the eternal uncaused torch, is giving light to another torch. Well, do we have a torch, two different torches with different natures? So one of them is a real torch, the other is like a fake baby torch. It doesn't work that way. Okay, it doesn't make any sense to think of that way. So although the persons are caused, they all fully possess the divine nature, and causation does not denote nature. It is something relational, right? And if we allowed something relational to be part of nature, then in a way we will essentially be saying God could only exist in relation to something else. Then that will mean God will have to create. But that's the origin of this problem. That denies free will of God, and first of all, the whole logic of that does not make any sense. So if you're a Muslim or a non-Trinitarian, let me tell you this, friendly advice, you don't want to be making this argument. You're going to make yourself look like an idiot if you make this kind of an argument. I'm not saying you are, I've just heard some people make this argument. It doesn't make any sense. And this will finalize all the questions and answers that is present in this presentation.
Okay, you heard all those. I'm going to explain everything for you guys. So this guy thinks this objection is stupid or something like this, or is idiotic. That how can you say God have a cause? What's the big deal? If God have a cause, it doesn't matter, right? I'm going to show you why it matters. Okay, so let's go. Now, I'm going to use the examples that he has used. Okay, so the first one he used is this: Gregory of Nyssa, right? Gregory of Nyssa. Wait, let me change the pen I'm using. Okay, Gregory of Nyssa, that's who he is using. Okay, so we have Gregory of Nyssa. Okay, and we use their own examples to show that this is false. Now, he used the example of the tree. Okay, now this guy that is talking here, he used the example of torches. Okay, now so let's go. So Gregory of Nyssa is saying that you imagine you have two trees. Okay, this is the first one, and this is the second tree. Okay, he's saying that they both have the same nature, the tree nature. Let's call it the tree nature. Sorry about my handwriting. But he said causation. If this tree just grow on itself, by itself, it just sprouted out of nowhere. So this first one, the A, sprouted out of nowhere, and then B was planted. Okay, he's saying, does that matter? Does that change the fact that this B has the same nature as A? The answer is no. When we are talking about, is this a tree? Yes. Is this a tree? Yes. Okay, that's what they are trying to affirm here, that it doesn't matter whether it was planted or not, whether it was, so they are saying the causation, the activities that cause A and B, it doesn't change their own nature. Okay, so because this one was not planted and this one was planted, it doesn't change the fact that both of them are trees. Fine, let's just take the argument first. Now, this guy's own argument, use the other one. He used torches. Okay, I always like when they want to be rational and they don't want to talk about mystery. When you don't want to talk about mystery, I always like it. Okay, see the second example, and I'll show you why it doesn't work. He said, imagine you have two torches. Okay, this is a torch. You know all those fires that I used to carry in the cave that you light up. Okay, and then you have the other torch. Okay, so now he said this torch A and this torch B. Imagine this one was the one that lighted this other one. So this torch A gave its light to this other one, and then this one too was able to light. And by the way, light from light. Remember the Nicene Creed? Light from light, all this stuff. Anyway, so if this torch, you carried it and you use it to light the other torch, he's saying, does that change the fact that this is a torch? They still have the same torch nature. The torch nature is the same. Like this second one, does it mean that I will not use it to light the room? It's going to work. Whether it was caused to exist or not, it doesn't matter. Okay, that is the entirety of the argument. that they try to use to disprove causation. Now I'll show you why this is false or why this doesn't work. Let's go back to Gregory of Nyssa. When you are talking about trees, fine, it doesn't matter. When you're talking about trees, we don't care whether a tree was caused to exist or not. Okay, whether this tree, let's say this first tree is 30 years old, okay, and this one is 1 year old, or let's say 2 years. I don't like saying 1 year. 2 years old. This one is 30 years. This one is 2 years. Whether this one is big, okay, this one is big and this one is small. Do you see, like, whatever thing you say about the two, it doesn't change the fact that they still have the tree nature. If this is a big tree and this is a small tree, they are still trees. If this is 30 years old and this one is 2 years old, it's still a tree. Why am I saying this? Because of these two attributes that both of us want to affirm. Eternality, okay, and what was the second one? Eternality and power, okay, power. Now, we all want to affirm this for God. When we are talking about God, all these things don't matter. For example, we believe God is eternal, meaning it will matter how old your God is. If your God is just began to exist, let's say even this one is eternal, but any which way, this one is older than this one. Meaning, if a God just let's say one God just came into existence yesterday, that cannot be the God of Abraham, okay? That God just popped out of nowhere and he existed, just like the tree just sprouted from nowhere. That thing matters when we're talking about the Abrahamic faith anyway, okay? Now, the age of your God matters. So if your God is not eternal, we say that's not the God of Abraham, okay? Now, if this tree is small and this one is big, when the wind comes and it swipes all the big tree will stay there. The small tree will be destroyed. Or even goats will even eat the small tree if it doesn't go fast enough. And the big tree will be safe from all these things. The point I'm making is that power also matters. When we are talking about God, it matters if your God is powerful. So the whole thing I'm saying is that when you want to just use this nature thing, even the weakest tree will still be a tree. And when we are talking about God, we are talking about the greatest possible being. The greatest possible being. This is what they call perfect being theology. God is the greatest. You cannot have something. So in the case of this small tree, this big tree is greater than this small tree because it's bigger, it's stronger, it's older. Many other things we can say about it. So that's one that to refute Gregory of Nyssa's analogy there. Even though I agree, they still have the same nature, but this one is weaker. And those things matter. And by the way, I'll get into it later. But let's just go to the second guy, objection 2. Okay. See what he is saying. He's saying touches. And I like this example because this one is actually talking about causation. They are related. Okay. In a way, A and B are related. So A gave light to B. He's saying that this does not matter because A gave light to B. Does that mean that this B is not a touch? It's still a touch. But when we are talking about God, it matters if your God is caused or not. Okay, so in the case of the touches, no one asks like, why is this touch caused by this other one? Now there's a big problem. Okay, but in the case of we are talking about the God of Abraham, the God of Abraham by definition is uncaused. Uncaused. That is his property. That is the God of Abraham, the ultimate source of being. The church father said the Son and the Holy Spirit, they are not the source of their own being. The Father is uncaused cause, and you see from his own writing too, which shows that the Father is the ultimate reality, the one that caused every other thing in existence, whether the Son and the Holy Spirit and the entire creation is the Father. Okay, this shows us that that property is possessed only by the Father. Just like this A. This A is priority to this B. In the case of God of perfect being theology, it would matter if your God is actually the one that is causing another God or whatever to exist. That's why we don't even believe it's possible. And this is the next point I'll get to end this video. Let's just end this, guys. There's something called essential attributes. Okay, essential attributes. Now, this guy was talking about relational attributes. And I can just call this extrinsic because I'll make another video of showing a real scholar actually explain this thing, and I'll show you why it doesn't work even with the real scholar. And then you have intrinsic attributes. Intrinsic attributes are attributes you have within yourself by virtue of yourself. Extrinsic attributes can be relational, can be many other things, but they are not just within yourself. Okay. Now, Both of them are under essential attributes. So just because you have a relational attribute, it doesn't mean it's not essential to who you are. Okay? So he wants to put this relational attribute in the hypostasis, saying that it's just the hypostatic property. No, it does matter. It's essential to that being. Okay? If you have a property that is not essential to your being, then what's it called? That is not part of the what makes, for example, God's essential property includes both of them. So if a God, for example, is not eternal, is there anything wrong with, let's say there's one concept of God. Some people believe that their own God just existed yesterday, but he has all the divine attributes. He's all powerful, all knowing, all these things. Perfect being theology, used by the Abrahamic faith anyway. If you want to believe in the God of Abraham, we would say that God is not God. Why? Because he's not eternal. Okay, that's one. Let's say a God that is eternal, he has all the other divine attributes, but he lacks knowledge, for example. We'll say that God is not God. So those attributes matter, whether intrinsic or extrinsic. If you think they don't matter, then you're not talking about the God of Abraham anymore. Then you should be comfortable saying that the Father is caused too. Imagine the Father is caused, the Son is caused, the Holy Spirit is caused. Would you have any problem with that? They will say yes. That's why the church fathers never went close to that place of talking about the Father being uncaused. All of them are being caused. They always want to maintain. And in fact, they said the Father is greater than the Son for that very reason, and the Holy Spirit. For that very reason, that is the source. Is the source. And these guys are the effect of the source. Okay, I don't know if this video is getting too long, but also he touched on something. He said something, but let me just quickly refute that one too. He said, imagine that a particular nature, you cannot cause something that is not from your own nature. So a human cannot beget a TV. Yeah, he said that, right? But he's focusing on the effect. He's not focusing on the process. This middle process that just happened, it matters. So if, let's say, we believe God cannot create another God, because by virtue of this thing of creating another God, that God that was created, even though he has all the divine attributes, will not be God. For just this reason that it was caused. Because this one lacks that. This one doesn't have that property of being caused. And this one does. It has this extra thing about it. So this one is God and this one is not. I hope you learned something from this video. So see you guys later. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.